He's one of the most read writers of our time.
At least 50 novels in print, dozens of short stories, and he's still writing as we speak.
He wants to terrify us. He wants to disgust us, to play with all of our basic fears, because he thinks that fear is the strongest emotion.
He invented some of the scariest monsters, and he revamped some of the classic ones.
What we're trying to do is get into his head. What's the equation? What makes up these stories?
When you think of modern horror, whether in print or on the screen, you think of
Stephen King.
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 What we're trying to do is find out, what do all of his works have in common? Now that's a tough question when you're dealing with someone who's covered everything, and I mean everything in the genre.
After taking a closer look, we found that the Stephen King narrative has about 6 parts.
He loves small towns, especially those in Maine.
Most of his characters are developed within a family.
He puts a lot of attention on details of the past, things that happened before the narrative even started, and usually these things are now going to threaten the present.
He also uses one or more of our most basic fears, things like claustrophobia, darkness, deformity, and King is highly influenced by real experiences that have scared him in his own life.
And he recreates one of 3 monsters.
And to top it off, the police and the military are useless, and so is the clergy.
Stephen King was born 1947 in Portland, Maine.
His dad left when he was 2, leaving him, his mother, and his older brother David to fend for themselves.
When he was a teenager, he found some books in his aunt's attic by H.P. Lovecraft. They had pictures of monsters in them. This inspired him to write his first short story, I Was a Teenage Grave Robber.
After getting his teaching certificate, King couldn't find a job. He wrote half of the novel Carrie, but threw it away.
His wife Tabitha found it in the trash and told him, "No, you're going to finish this."
Carrie was his first novel, published in 1974, and the film was made 2 years later.
Probably the most interesting thing about King is that he plays with all of the monsters. His favorite is the doppelganger, or the idea that a character has a good self and a bad self.
King says Carrie's character is based on a girl that he knew in junior high.
She lives alone with her overprotective religious mother. The movie opens with a pitiful scene where she has a little accident in gym class.
Of course, the blood means she's become a woman, and to her mom, that's a loss of innocence.
There's a lot of symbolism in the film. When the girls start to throw pads at her, it's almost as if they were stoning her like in the Bible. There's religious symbols everywhere, like crosses, candles, paintings, and Bible verses.
The bullies rig the prom ballots and make Carrie the queen of the prom. After that, they then pour this huge vat of blood over her head, and which is probably the most humiliating thing you could do to a poor girl.
Then she just gets crazy. She has this weird telekinesis that allows her to lock all the doors, light the school on fire, and kill everyone, including her mom.
At the end of the movie, Stephen King makes a wonderful statement by showing all of the Christian symbols inside of the house. After that, the house implodes as if it's going down to hell.
We see a lot of common threads or symbols throughout all of King's work.
When Carrie walks home from her killing spree, she causes 2 of the bullies to die in a fiery car crash. Ironically, we see a similar car crash in another of his doppelganger films, Misery, but this time it takes place in the snow.
famous novelist Paul Shelton crashes in a rural area after completing a new book. His #1 fan, Annie Weeks, rescues him from the car and takes care of him. Well, sort of.
Annie's also a doppelganger. She's obsessed with Shelton. She loves him. She kept newspaper clippings about him and knew everything about his books, but as we all know, sometimes love hurts.
King paid very close attention to past details. It's very obvious in the film Misery. For example, the clippings in Annie's scrapbook show us all of the mistakes of her past, including the clippings about people she murdered. Another one would be Annie's pet pig, Misery. This represents her obsession with Shelton's main character.
Stephen King uses the notion of useless authority in many secluded areas that his films and novels take place in, which makes all of the residents of the town feel really unsafe.
Tell you what I'll do. Nothing's been reported out here, but I'll put his name through our system. If anything turns up, I'll call you right back.
Ah, I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye, Miss Sindel.
We got a phone call. Busy morning.
Yeah, work.
One of the most interesting things about Misery is that Annie is actually based on an encounter that King had with his #1 fan, Mark Chapman.
Mr. Chapman can be connected to another of King's stories. This one was released 10 years before Misery.
Mark Chapman was charged with killing John Lennon, who sang the song Instant Karma, which inspired King to write the most recognizable novel, The Shining.
Here's Johnny!
The Shining takes place at the Overlook Hotel.
Again, a remote location.
And it's about a struggling writer who is an alcoholic, just as King was for over a decade.
Jack Torrance gets a job as the keeper of the hotel. During the harsh winter months, Jack, his wife, and son are the only ones living in the so-called haunted hotel for 5 months.
This is a difficult time for Jack, as he's trying to prove himself as a responsible male and take care of his family. Internal conflict and the notion of patriarchy versus paternity also plays a huge role in his going mad.
Dad? Do you feel bad?
I'm tired.
Why don't you go to sleep?
I can't. You got too much to do.
Also, we have the notion of selling one's soul to the devil in this film. King seems to like this thing, and he always comments on the consequences.
In a way, the Overlook Hotel represents the sins of all fathers. Not only did Jack try to kill his whole family, but a previous winter keeper actually succeeded in doing it.
Stephen King used to stay at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado as inspiration to write his 3rd novel in 1976. Edgar Allan Poe also influences King. In The Shining, the phrase, "and the Red Death held sway over all," references to Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. He also says in The Shining that Poe is the great American hack.
When talks of turning the novel into a film came about, King actually wrote his version of a screenplay, but it was rejected by the director, Stanley Kubrick.